Welcome. We are honored to have Mary Charleson back with us again today. She presented on November the 20th to the Grand Connection community. She presented 13 pandemic digital marketing trends, truthfully finding the opportunity during this pandemic. Today, we're going to go deeper into each trend. Mary's going to share with us some of the stories and specific businesses that have taken that trend and turned it into an opportunity. So Susan and Mary, thank you for being here so much. We appreciate you taking the time.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. We've got lots of stories we can share.
Awesome. So Susan, do you want to start with the first trend?
Yeah. And then just to thank you, Mary, we've had so many people asking us how they can take this deeper, and they were so grateful for your talk. Anyone who's listening now, you can even pause right now, go to the Facebook group for the Grand Connection. Mary's first talk is here, where she goes in detail on these 13 trends. Right now we're going to talk about examples that will tie in, and there's also a blog on our Grand Connection website that lists the trends, so you can follow along with it. So Mary, the first trend was motivations have changed. Can you briefly describe that, and then let's think about some examples to share?
This was where we looked at that whole Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And how we've all been forced down the triangle, being motivated around things around health, safety first, right? We have to satisfy those before we can go up into kind of friendships and self-actualization. And essentially what it means is that the companies that were delivering around health and safety are double down and going hard. And the ones that are at the top had to figure out a way to kind of reframe and deal with those needs on the bottom to be able to sell towards the top. So Watson Gloves is a great local Vancouver example. Company's been around for 100+ years, right? They're in the business of selling gloves and hand protection. Talk about, the perfect position company for this. Curiously, they actually were established in 1918, the last pandemic, right? It's just kind of crazy. But what they did is they battened down on the whole kind of disposable gloves and, and PPP, like for protection for medical workers. And they got a lot of narrative around that in earned media by giving some of that stuff away. They also recognized that they could help, first line responders, police, fire. So they started manufacturing some masks for that group in there, because they actually have manufacturing facilities in Vancouver, local. And they put those out to that community, and then they've been now fulfilling, paid orders. They just took $1 million contract for Home Depot, and they're also selling online through Amazon, a product that didn't exist for them in their SKU this time last year. They also recognized that gardening was going to be a big thing. Remember, we talked about do-it-yourself culture on the rise? So they battened down on the production of gardening gloves and the whole victory garden, right? So they recognized, the health, safety, all that stuff, where to take advantage. Obviously, they're not, there's some SKUs they're not selling into because those industries have been impacted, but they reframed it for the business. At the complete other end of it, it would be a travel company. There's one called Active Adventures. They're in New Zealand. They sell packages for, kind of adventure travel holidays. And I know the fellow there, Maddie, and just listening to a podcast recently about they're selling trips for kind of epic adventures and, going to Tanzania, all these, African safaris, right? Nobody is traveling right now, but what they're doing is that they're acknowledging that, yeah, you're not traveling, but let's plan the epic trip that you're going to look forward to when we get through this. And while they're doing it, they've built in all the assurances around, the safety, how they're doing it, in an environmental sustainable way. Even when they do get, they're all the whole clean tech, all the stuff that they're doing. But more than anything, it's the financial assurance as well, is that it's $500 down on some of their trips, fully transferable, refundable. You can assign it to somebody else, and the balance isn't due, totally refundable up to 30 days before. So basically, they're saying, buy into the aspiration at the top end of Maslow and make yourself feel better, right? You've got something to look forward to, right? And we will go when it's safe. There's an example of feeding in both ends of the triangle, but understanding what needs need to be met first.
The getting your money back is big. Like,
Oh, it's
I
huge.
know that people I know are planning trips. The big question is, can I get a refund on my plane ticket? Can I get a refund on my lift tickets for skiing? Whatever it is.
Yeah.
That they're fearful because you don't want to be investing in something, and we have no idea what's going to happen when things will shut down.
Yeah, and basically what they've said is that that's okay, right?
So then they would have to work with all their suppliers to
Yes.
make sure that everybody is in alignment in being able to provide these refunds and being flexible.
But they're also recognizing it's, when people, the initial travel will likely be, family, friends, a destination with a hug
Yeah.
at the end of it, right? At the end of the customer journey. But beyond that, right now, because we've been grounded, there will be this desire, and there's this group of people who've been saving money and they've been making money. And not everyone is doing poorly during COVID. Some people are doing very well, and they're actually not spending that money. There will be money for epic trips, and they've recognized this at the top end. Yeah.
Well, what I think too is very interesting there, it's really giving people something to look forward to, you said. And I think that is magnificent to put that in their vision, their direction, and for the future, to have something within themselves that they can look forward to.
Yeah, they're selling the promise,
Mm-hmm.
right? You hold a ticket, right? You can get through the winter because you have a ticket.
You know, what I'm also noticing is people are investing in some sort of educational program or self-development, or yoga trainings for, like, they've moved some of the 200, 500 hour teacher trainings online. So now you can take classes with certifications with some of the great people you could never afford to travel with, or put that time, and do it online, get the certification.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to be in this place later where, you've got that skill set. So you're investing in yourself, and then those businesses are now moving to reaching bigger markets because they're being allowed to do these things which they had to do, in person. Now they're being given the permission to be able to certify people online.
Right.
So that's changed too.
And it's costing them less money to put on these training programs.
Yeah.
I mean,
It costs them less, and they're charging less too. And then it's costing the people taking the training less because they don't have to travel.
Right. No, exactly.
So that's a big shift there too. So number 2, workplaces have shifted to home. Carolyn, we have noticed this.
You guys own this.
We own, we saw this happening pretty quickly back in March, where we decided to start the Grand Connection.
Yeah.
What motivated us, Carolyn?
Well, so much. Honestly, Susan and I stood at the Grand Canyon, this miraculous view, and we thought, what a miracle this is, what a massive, incredible view. And we thought behind us, it was March 15th, is this pandemic. All these businesses are going to be suffering. They're going to be in fear. They're going to be in isolation. They're going to be searching for business skills. How do I shift my business from my current functionality to go online? How do I shift digitally for my business? So Susan and I decided at that moment, the Grand Connection was born at the Grand Canyon. And we said, we have to help them. We know too much about business in all the years that we have been teaching business and serving businesses in the roles that we have. We need to come together. So this online platform has absolutely created an opportunity for us to serve businesses, to teach them business skills like you're teaching today, Mary, and many other experts we've had online at the Grand Connection. We're attracting businesses from around the world. It's so incredible. From New York to England to Scotland, Chile, Peru, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, all across the States and all across Canada. This pandemic, I think, has created an incredible opportunity for businesses to show up and serve in meaningful ways and have impact on these businesses when they need it so much right now.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing this from their bedroom / office, wherever they are. Like, people are working from home and able to connect and do things that they would never have been able to do before. And the technology's moved alongside. And I mean, Zoom has been around for a long time, but people have adopted it in the last 8 months to that extent that everybody,
how the whole adaptation, right? Like the laggards boom, have been shoved into the forward part of the curve, right? And
Yeah.
knowledge workers, right, now can do anything from online.
Well, you can, and it doesn't cost very much, people. It's just really being bold and courageous to step up, to serve and educate people online. I mean, that's what it is. And well, you need a good business strategy too, yet it's an opportunity that every business has to create value for their customers.
Yeah. So number 3, this is where we've also worked with a lot of clients and people at the Grand Connection. Online shopping increases, where we've seen years of growth happen in literally 7 months during the pandemic.
Yeah. And I mean, this was a trend that was already underway, but we've seen this absolutely magnified. And I think sometimes we get lost in the news around Amazon as being the only game in town. But I think something else that deserves note here is the role of Shopify, a good old Canadian company, right? Started by, was it Tobias Luke and Scott Lake, as an online, basically an online retail shop for snowboards, right? And they've been able to help users, become better merchants, and they also share the data on the back end. And so I think, that's another piece of all of this, is recognizing that there are other options out there for small businesses to get online and have a retail merchant shop, and essentially, be able to, to launch an online store to respond to all of this stuff, and not just go, okay, well, if I can't get on Amazon, or if they won't let me have so much of a profit margin, I'm hooped, right? But there are other games. So I think that's, for small business owners, that's worthy, and it's a great Canadian success story.
Yeah. And WordPress, I mean, I deal with WordPress all the time. I mean, they have, the amount of users in WordPress has increased phenomenally for WooCommerce, which is their shopping platform. And there's plugins where you could do delivery and options like that too, so that you can have those all on your WordPress website, similar to what Shopify offers too. And lots of new stuff coming up, and people are starting to use it, and they can get going quickly to do that shift. I heard Bill Gates on a podcast talk, and this was a couple of months ago, but he basically said we have had 7 years of adoption digitally in the last 7 months.
Yeah, that's probably right.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's now a few months later, so I'm not sure what the new number is, but it's a lot. My mom is doing stuff online, and she was not before, and she's comfortable with it now.
Right.
Like, she buys from Lululemon all the time,
And that's why I think that once we kind of get through this stuff, and we will, that the period that follows afterwards will be quite a roaring time. It's almost like, the roaring 20s after the 1918 pandemic cleared, with the internet times 10. Right? It's like the stage is set. And I really think that if there's no other positive thing to think about, just think about that, right? That has to have a major impact in all this, which means that, some of these things that we talked about, that are trends that are magnified, they're not rolling back. And now is the time to make the switch and not try to play catch up later. Yeah.
So I'm feeling chills right now as a small business owner, of this feeling that I gotta, we have to be on here. We've got to learn these tools. We've gotta be okay with it. Just don't sit back and wait.
No, and the other piece for me here is to step up and level up yourself and your business and your leadership, and get in front of a camera. Start creating videos. Video is going to be the marketing platform in the future. And people are looking, like you said in your talk, looking for what I call truth marketing. They're looking for people that they authentically engage with, and that sense of genuine service.
Imperfection is almost better than edited perfection, because it means that you're human. It means that you're real. It means that, as I'm talking here, somebody collapses the door and comes in and goes, "Mom, are you online?" Or it's like, yeah. And all of a sudden it's a window into, oh, she's a mom. And okay, that's, or whatever, right? It's those little truth bombs that make people real, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Carolyn and I are really good at being imperfect too.
Like I tell people, when we started the Grand Connection, we did everything wrong. Our lighting was poor. Our cameras weren't good. We're just using our computer. We talked over each other all the time. And, you know, we had some people come to our first or second event and they haven't been back, but I can tell you, if you're out there right now, come back, please. We've improved.
So this leads on to, since you're talking about the people that on the events and online, number 4, increasing online media usage, where we've gone from spending an average of 3 hours a day to over 10 hours a day. When we take a look at our media for work as well as entertainment. So we're online way more now.
Right, and that's, you know, it's taking its toll, right? The screen time, the vision, all of that is taking its toll as well. But I think what's interesting there is the opportunities for the businesses that might not have considered online as an option. And one great example, and again, it's a local here in Vancouver, but it could be anywhere in the world, and that was accessibility to counseling. And we know that there's like mental health issues, like the pandemic has pushed things to the extreme. But what it's done is broken down barriers. And so Jericho Counseling, I know, is doing online, you know, video chats. And so it's made it more accessible. It's removed the stigma. You don't actually have to get over the hurdle of getting there and walking in the office and admitting, right? I'm just, you know, same thing with medical appointments as well. And, you know, making that more accessible. And I think some of this stuff, it's enabled new delivery platforms for some businesses that might not have considered it previously. Obviously, you can't do all medical appointments by Zoom, but you can do maybe, you know, take off a portion of it that you kept them out of the medical office, you've kept everyone safer. Same thing with the counseling, right? So I just think that's one interesting kind of business example of starting to see new distribution channels that you might not have considered previously.
I agree. And I think it's going to continue. I prefer to sit at my desk, and if I'm going to want to see the doctor to tell her what's going on, I just want to go have my lunch, go for my hike, and then talk to my doctor. I mean, it saves time, energy, parking, everything. Right. I mean, that's the value here too, is you're saving time.
Right. Yeah.
There was a bit of a shift. I have several clients in this space that were in panic in May, June, July, trying to get these things online and find secure ways to do it.
And again, it's the security issue, right? And the whole client confidentiality and all of that stuff. But, you know, tech, whenever there's a problem, tech rises to the occasion and delivers a solution. And, you know, I think those things have taken place as well. So.
Well, even Zoom, the platform we're using, they've increased their security features within it, you know, during the whole last 8 months, and they're always adding new features. So I guess every time there's a problem, they have to fix it.
Yeah, the insight there is that, you know, could there be a new audience that you could be reaching, you know, through, you know, utilizing online platforms, or how could you serve new groups of people? Created greater opportunity for your potential reach, and your clientele can be global, but the flip side of that is your competitors are also global.
Yes.
So it's a double-edged sword.
So so the what I hear though is that if you can be one of the earlier people to start reaching that global market, you can get your footing in before everybody else. And you see this with all businesses. Like, some people are the laggards, and they don't get online, they don't adopt the new technology, and they don't grow as well as other businesses that jump into it early.
Yeah.
So to think that through. So number 5 is, I mentioned this already earlier, focus on self-improvement.
Right. So, you know, there's some interesting ones here, and I thought a really cool story, and we mentioned earlier around yoga and, you know, Lululemon, and they've always had a grassroots approach, right? The whole ambassador program, where, you know, typically they have kind of 4 to 8 ambassadors per store, and that's their outreach, and how they, you know, within the community, the ambassadors teach yoga classes, and that's how they, in events. So, but they've had to kind of switch that up, obviously, during the pandemic, right? And so there's a couple interesting things that they've done, kind of the at-home fitness thing. So they've had their ambassadors go online, you know, teaching the classes. They've also acquired a company called Mirror. Now this is in the United States. It's not available in Canada, but it's an at-home fitness company. They acquired them in July 2020 for $500 million. Now, that to me is a huge indication that they don't think this trend is going to go away.
Mm.
So in the whole, and it was the whole key of bolstering their whole digital ecosystem, right? Creating, a personal immersive kind of, sweat and mindfulness sessions, right? Workouts, and, they've got, weekly live classes, thousands of on-demand workouts, and also one-on-one coaching, right? So they've hedged a bet. They've placed a stake in this ground, and we've seen other fitness companies do this as well. But this to me says that they said, this is not going to go away. This is a huge new potential, because people can do it from anywhere, anytime, anywhere around the world. They also launched a virtual shopping concierge appointments, right? So when you went into the stores, there was always somebody who kind of helped educate you. So they did this, they called it digital educators. And so over video chat, so it's taking the online purchasing experience, but adding the whole digital educator video chat to it as a consultative kind of experience, just kind of digging a little deeper around, some of the things that they had done. And I thought this was really quite interesting. And I think what you could take from that is reframe it and go, okay, everybody's selling online or trying to get to sell online, but what are some of the products that could benefit by having the additional service or the one-on-one consultative process? Bigger priced items like trips, bigger, or things like this, like fashion, or just, knowing you, or let's see a picture. Okay, well, may I suggest, right? And it's like having this, like you can't tell me that they don't sell more stuff because of that. Because all of a sudden I've got a video chat and I'm online with a girlfriend who's advising me on stuff. Like, just, like hand over your credit card, right? Like, you got me.
Well, and their consultancy is so good. Like when you used to go into their store, I have a great story. My son and I went into their store in Vancouver. This is before the pandemic, and he got accepted. When he was in the change room and I was in a separate change room, he found out that he got accepted in a co-op program. And so he's telling me, I'm jumping around, and I think it was an ambassador that was in the store. I don't know. She said, what's happening? And I said, well, he just found out he got with the city of Kelowna, a co-op program from his school. And they said, oh, that's fantastic. Well, doesn't he need some new pants? I said, he does actually. And so we picked out the pants, and he came out of the change room. I came up with the pants, and she said to me, this is on us. I said, what?
Wow.
What?
Yeah.
I said, no.
Yeah.
No. And then I just felt so bad that she was going to give it to me for nothing. I bought 2 things too, because, right? So how smart is that, Mary?
Yeah. And how many people did you go on to talk
about? Lots.
Right? And
lots.
Share the story. And those, it sort of jumps into the whole, word of mouth and being word of mouth wordy and sharing one-on-one experiences. But when you create those little memorable moments for a customer, you will then tell that story. You'll share it online. You'll tell people, right? And that is marketing right now. It's creating shareable moments.
Yeah. I mean,
we've sort of jumped from self-improvement, but I want to just add in, since we're talking about this shopping experience, because I have a client that's got a retail, and they're suffering, right? The rent, they got no people coming in. You're still paying exorbitant rent costs. One of the things that we've looked at doing is co-oping the space with other people who have, a similar market, so that they could share that space. And then another thing to do is to do the walkthrough tours, to FaceTime. Like to be a Facebook Live where you walk through the store, similar to like the concierge service, but you're kind of personalizing it and talking on Facebook and walking through the store and talking about the new inventory that's come in. And then even getting, trying on some stuff and showing it and things like that, so that it gets people interested to come out or to at least try ordering online. And again, another thing with the stores with clothing is they've had to do the full refunds, like full returns if it doesn't work out, right?
Right.
So big changes in how people are running their businesses to try to get interest and show people a different experience when they're doing it more online.
Yeah. No, and I just, there was the Lululemon, they were hit with the store closures, but 61% of their overall revenue so far this year has been online, and e-com sales have grown by 25% year over year. Right? So
and they have an easy refund policy. You can just return things.
Yeah.
So you're not worried about it.
It's kind of,
And then another thing that they have going for them is that once you've bought something, there's a name to that product and you can kind of remember it, and then just you know it's probably going to fit you the same because they have a way of telling, you know, you can, if you can remember the name of the pants, the tights you got, right? Oh, I got these tights.
Right.
And you can talk to somebody and then they can sort of say, well, these ones fit the same. And their online store, if you're looking for ideas, look at the Lululemon online store and see how they categorize the products into different fits too,
right,
so that it can help you as a shopper experience that better and make it easier for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So something to learn from. I always tell my clients, go and look what the bigger companies are doing and
right,
get ideas from that for you, because you're
just borrow it.
Borrow
Right.
the ideas, and you can do some of these things with some of things like Shopify, which is less expensive monthly costs, but it's not, Lululemon obviously has built their platforms and they're very expensive. They've got an IT department, but you can still do some of these things with other tools like Shopify or WordPress, because there are the plugins available to do it. So it's available now, which it used to not be. 10 years ago, you couldn't have these shopping experiences online unless you were a big company.
Right.
So number 6, the do-it-yourself culture is on the rise.
Yes. Well, everything from, gardening to home improvement to, we talked about what Home Depot was doing, how they had to actually hire more people because, people were like taking their money for travel and spending it on their houses. But I thought what was an interesting kind of story is to take a look at the companies that were maybe impacted by the do-it-yourselfers, right? Like the hair companies, the hair salons that, early on had to shut down. And so there's one cool example. It was a company, again, it's a hair salon in Vancouver called Extifers. They're on Broadway. They've been there for many, many years. And they've got pretty solid, loyal clientele. And so what they did was that anyone who had color, any kind of things like that, they basically put together little care packages, and clients could order them, and they would then have them you could pick it up at the salon, or in some cases they actually delivered them, and then they would do a video FaceTime with them on applying and doing the various things for their hair as a way to basically get them through, right? We'll make it so that you're not embarrassed, right? We'll get you through. And then once we're able to open, people have said now that when they came back, I've talked to Chris at Exifers, and he said, we've maintained our client until, in fact, we've grown it more, because what's happened, some of the salons have closed down because they just didn't have the loyalty factor. And the women and men who we treated well as clients told their friends. Mm-hmm. And we've brought them over. We've had to bring in 2 more stylists to deal with the deluge of increased clientele. If that doesn't tell you something, right? Mm-hmm. So you thought about it from the customer perspective, not a competitor. Like, how can we help them go over the top, do something memorable, story worthy, word of mouth worthy, and do it for a very loyal audience who will then share the story, right? And now, he said, we've quantum leaped our business because of that. And if those clients stick around like the rest of them have, it's growth that will stay.
So have they done any recordings of this so that they can use that on social media too? So
I don't know that they've really made as much out of it as they could. It's more of we talk about kind of that one-to-one share. Yeah. It kind of all happened in their own little ecosystem. Mm-hmm. Within their clients.
So taking it another step, they may be doing this, but to do the one-to-many. Yeah. So that you could get, if they took some of these examples they did where they were giving somebody the lesson and they record that, right, then they could do the one-to-many and reach more people with that same time.
But they recognize the power in how could we help some of our best, they did for everyone, but could do it for everyone, but took our best customers, mm-hmm, and what could we do? Right. And they've got some pretty high-end kind of clientele, some pretty who's who in the business world. Rick Hansen's wife, Amanda, I don't know how many times we must be on the same haircutting cycle, because Amanda's often sitting next to me. Right. But you just sort of look and I know they basically serve the who's who and talk about a way to get your message spread.
Well, also, and looking after their needs, like they're in a position that they're thinking, I think every single business needs to think this way, mm-hmm, Mary, and I know you do too, like, what do my clients need right now? What do my customers, what do they need the most? Well, how can I serve them in that way and make it so that, like you said, tide them through?
Right. And for a lot of those clients, they didn't really need to have their hair done. What they needed was to look presentable on a Zoom call, because that's what their job was requiring of them.
Number 7, hyper-localized focus with a social trend around favoring country and regional kind of solutions and an increased in nationalistic behaviors. Well, that's a mouthful. Tell us a little bit about that.
So this was that, this is that whole kind of local, we're talking local examples. And I thought, there's one really kind of cool example. It's for the Hotel Zed, right? Local, and again, we're talking travel here, but this is how a travel brand basically kind of took advantage of the whole local thing and was encouraging, I don't know if you know Hotel Zed, it's kind of retro. Mandy Farmer kind of took it over from her dad. It's old-fashioned motels. They're in Kelowna, Victoria, and Tofino. Stuff like turntables, dial-up, rotary dial phones, just really cool stuff. But they've done it in a really fresh way, right? And kind of retro cool, and they've Wi-Fi and great beds and everything else about it. But what they did was it's what they've done in terms of getting their story told is really kind of interesting. They've done things around the bubble vacation. And I thought this is really cool. The bubble vacation in Tofino. And so the whole idea of going on a vacation with your bubble locally, but then also combining it with their kind of retro, kind of funky, hippie-ish cool for Tofino. And they decided to have the psychic den. So go with your bubble and go and get a psychic reading, right? Just crazy stuff like that. It's so on brand. It just makes total sense. And that created some very, customer created engaging content that gets shared. You could see people tagging their friends, and you could see them go DM me, right? And so you could see it was moving to those direct channels, but it's because they created that really cool content around it that it made it very shareable. So, I mean, there's an example of, a local company that could be doing poorly that is actually doing amazing. In fact, I think Mandy just won I think it was the RBC Entrepreneurs Award for 2020. Female
Yes,
entrepreneur.
I just saw that online.
Yeah, it's just
yesterday.
it's a fairly recent post.
Yeah,
right?
yesterday.
And just being really timely. I think they even did some stuff around being dog friendly during COVID, because they recognized so many people are getting dogs, right? And so they did this whole thing around, bring your dog for your bubble vacation, right? And close to home. And so I think when you are highly culturally relevant, and but you do it in in a way that makes sense for your brand. Yeah. Then it becomes a story which gets told, and over. And again, just that whole, sharing word of mouth, people tagging friends, and going into that direct message. And I just thought, okay, this really, I can see it. I can go through the post. I can see where it went away into one-to-one. And that's just, that is very much on trend with what we were talking about with that whole word of mouth and the channels changing.
Absolutely. And also creating this amazing experience for people. I mean, people are staying in their bubble, but let's do something that's fun. Let's do something that's a creative experience that we can have fun again and just get out of the house.
Skateboard in Victoria. Let's go have a psychic reading with,
Oh, good for them.
Right. Yeah. So I just thought that was kind of a cool example for that one.
Mm-hmm. It's a great example of showing us and everybody listening how you can be on brand and find something really unique that people will share. That word of mouth, you talk about it. It's it's your number 13. I'm going right to the end, but it comes through all of them. Every experience, if we can do it really well, that word of mouth is what's going to help us win business and do better than others, or keep afloat too nowadays. Which is a lot of our strategy now. Let's keep afloat until things pick up for our people.
And altering your product if you need to, right? If it isn't relevant, right? How can we make it relevant in some capacity, right?
Exactly.
Or take a piece of it.
Yeah, the networking business. Like we joined in on the online networking. We didn't have offline, but we've met lots of people in our joint ventures who were totally offline events, and they've had to switch. Some of them waited for 3 or 4 months thinking, oh, it's going to go back to normal, and now are jumping in just now. Then there were others who just, immediately went virtual, and they grew globally, like, phenomenally well, very quickly, because they were ready to take that leap quickly. Yeah, big shift. Number 8, interactions have gone virtual with FaceTime Messenger, MS Teams, and Zoom. So we've talked about this quite a bit. Do you have another good example for us?
Some of these things start to dovetail into each other, right?
Yeah.
When we talk about brands changing things up, Airbnb Experiences is another great example of a company that's not maybe selling so much Airbnb actual lodging, but the Airbnb experiences with, learning to cook in France, learning, to be a wine connoisseur, and then those become experiences that potentially are, they're online, but they are something that somebody might plan a trip around in the future. Another thing that it's actually kind of cool, and it actually dovetails back into that workplaces shifting from home. I think the next big trend for Airbnb will be, it's not working from home, it's working from a home. And there is a difference. And the notion that you might go on an Airbnb experience, and if I'm going to work from home, why don't I go to Paris and live there for 2 months and work from home and then travel around there? Right. So the work from a home as opposed to work from home, I think there could be a really cool insight there.
Well,
you know what?
Okay, I can immediately, everyone's brains go on. Woo!
Where do I want to work from? Where do I want to work from?
Scotland.
Well, we were on a meeting yesterday, and the person had a background. She ordered off Amazon, and it looks like it's just an office, right? Yeah. So she has this big office, and she can walk around and move, because it's actually not a virtual one that you're squished in like a pancake, but it's a real looking like a room. And she says you can reach over, it looks like it's the table there. And so she's got this different virtual, and she could take that with her to Paris, right? She could take it, just roll it up. It's different. Like, there's a lot of different stuff coming out now.
Oh yeah, no, I look at that and I go, oh my God, just think about it for a second, right?
Well,
yeah, pretty cool.
Well, it's absolutely wonderful, and it really comes down to too is where do you want to go with this? People look at the pandemic as always a negative situation. There's lots of positives here.
Yeah,
there's lots of opportunities.
As you can gather, like I get pretty jazzed up about the positives, right?
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So, okay, this is my favorite, number 10, because this is really deep, and this is really what this is all about. Our behaviors are becoming habits, and habits amplified over time are becoming trends. This is a big deal because the longer this goes on, the more entrenched we become.
Yeah. And, I think there's so many pieces there that it impacts everything. Right. We talked about the online fitness and, the Lululemons and the 30-minute hit. Like, a lot of companies have taken their stuff online. That's just one piece of it. Right. But I can see it in myself too. Right. Like, I have changed behaviors. Like, online learning, teaching. I'm like, I don't know. Am I ever going to teach in a classroom again? Maybe not. Right. There's and how does that impact a lot of other decisions, especially if you want to work from Paris, right?
Yeah.
So I think fitness is a big one. I think just the whole downtown work culture, how it's changing the very construction of downtown office buildings, what they're being used for, purposed for. I think those are there's just this one is so far reaching that
education too. I look at my son, he's working today, but he's upstairs studying, and his professors are online, and some are good and not so good yet. The discipline that he has, but for that generation too, there's a lot of younger people that are really having a struggle with staying focused and staying disciplined to be educated online.
And speaking of shifts, I have a client that has shifted into training youth how to learn online.
Right. I can see that.
Yeah. And then there's another client that I had that's moved into helping people with Zoom fatigue. So they're trying to changing adapting what they're doing, but to the new needs and the new behaviors that we have now that we need help with, because we have new problems.
I think it's pretty safe to say that, you know, by the time this is all said and done, it's going to be a 2-year window. Really.
Yeah.
By the time everything kind of we sort of settle again. 2021 is going to be a continued, the long middle. We talked about the long middle at the beginning of the call, but just as things continue to kind of shift but settle into the new normal. And, you know, and some things will open up much sooner than others, but I think, you know, you can't tell me you change your behavior for 2 years that some things are just not absolutely ingrained. What do they say, 30 days to change a habit? You know, right now we're locked into cement, like we're for some things. But I point back to that, you know, the Lululemon investing $500 million into that online acquisition and platform. That's not a company that's saying, yeah, we're going to do this for the pandemic.
No.
Okay. That's a major indicator. Yeah. And they did that in July, right? So for other companies, right? Like 30 Minute Hit as an example, it's a local company here. It's kind of a little kickboxing, the coach, it's not a group activity. Come in at any time you want, 30 minutes, you leave. They were very early adopters in terms of coming online, doing the online workouts. They had like gloves, right? So like they thought they would be okay, but then they had to go online as well. And they've said they've got whole new sectors that because they deal with a young mom, working mom, like people whose lives are complicated and who want hybrids. And I think that's the other major piece here is that some of this stuff will move online, but people are going to want the hybrids. So it's like, I'll go there on Thursday night to meet my girlfriends and we'll all go around the same time. But in between that, I'm going to be able to do it at home or when I'm away on work, right? So I think, you know, anyway,
yeah,
this one is a major disrupted category. And a lot of those people that used to work for those industries, those businesses that went out on their own have become little rock stars on their own and have got their own Instagram followers. They've got their own YouTube channels and subscribers. And why would they go back? They've become new entrepreneurs because they have their own celebrity following.
So this has happened in the yoga space like crazy. I have a lot of clients that are yoga studios and yoga teachers, and the yoga studios, some of them closed. And some of them adapted right away the virtual classes and did them online. And they've been able to have classes. They've been able to, you know, get the new safety rules in place. And they have some live classes with restrictions and rules and spacing and masks and all that stuff. But they're still like they now have 2 business models.
Right.
They now have the growth in the virtual, and what'll happen if the ones who make it after it's over, they'll have grown their market substantially from the others. But then there's also the cases that the yoga teachers who were studio teachers now have become entrepreneurs.
Yes.
So they've gone out on their own and they've now built up a tribe and they're doing online classes, and they now have a way because everybody's getting used to teaching and learning and doing the classes and practicing online. So now they have a bigger market now, because I used to never practice online and now I do every day. No, it's just, I'm used to it. I'm going to be good with it. I now know, I can travel somewhere and I can still do my class with my favorite teachers. Yeah. So it's a change there, and that's going to stay because it's convenient.
It's a convenient for sure.
Yeah. So here's number 11. Human connection and storytelling are on the rise.
Okay, well storytelling, as we said, never goes out of fashion, right? But I think there's some really interesting adaptations of the story narrative. And one great example that I just think, because you sort of think, okay, you know, alcohol, you know, beer companies, you know, obviously going out, they've been impacted, but, you know, home sales have gone up, right? So there's a company called Collective Arts. It's a brewery in Hamilton, Ontario, but they sell across Canada into 20 US states. I believe they're in China as well as Australia, and I think 9 countries in Europe. But basically what their whole kind of approach to things was that they swap out beer labels with different artists' work every few months. So their whole thing is kind of, the founders wanted to lend support for the visual arts and music arts. And so it's always fresh packaging. So to date, they've had over, over 2,000 artists, 40 countries represented. And so it allowed them to kind of localize their strategy as they grew. And so you kind of go, okay, well, how does this work now in COVID? Because they used to, host, when they went into Florida, they would host art installations, a week-long kind of live music, tap takeovers, almost like Instagram takeovers. How do we adapt that in COVID? And so what they, with restricted gatherings, is that they brought the content and experiences online. So they had live music series, they had their whole resident series of musicians that sort of became the centerpiece in telling their story around artists and the whole labeling, the whole thing of how they support the arts. They, essentially, and then they also did, Instagram takeovers. They did a concert series where they, actually streamed it from empty venues and put that out on their channels as well. And so essentially they connected their community. The whole, we talked about the island kind of being part of the conversation. It was part of their brand before, but they found a way to adapt the story and to share it, right? So the whole storytelling around the brand still remains strong, but they've adapted it for the environment that we're in, right? And they've done very little paid advertising to date. And it's simply because it was so much part of their brand that everyone wants to talk about it and share, right? And you talk about the arts and entertainment industry has been hit. They found a way to help that industry as well. And so they're getting a lot of goodwill in that community sharing their story. I just thought it's one of my favorite examples of this whole human connection and storytelling.
And they're supporting all those artists with them promoting their art and their position. So it's bringing the community and the artists and everything so much closer together, and people will stand by that continuously.
Yeah.
And adding to the storytelling, Carolyn, I think you could expand on this. In our networking group, when you go in and you meet people in the breakout sessions, the people who have the stories in their introductions are the people you remember. Because we go through and I'm meeting sometimes, meeting 100 people in a week, right? And I only remember those stories.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
And the stories that connect to what's important to me. Like we have to think about the stories that we tell and the impact and the connection that can have with the audience as well as the individual people. Like you said, Susan, in our breakout rooms or our brainstorming sessions at the Grand Connection, rather than just talking about yourself. It's a meaningful story that people remember and also connects you with them.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, now I'm seeing people teaching story writing skills all over the place. Like it's big now too.
Well, and it's the whole, the hero's journey, right? The climax, whatever. There's classic structure to storytelling, but it's also brands that have a founder story. I think right now have, to me, any good brand has to have a founder story. Brand Connection has a founder story, right? Like it is a part and parcel of a good brand strategy, but now more than ever, it gives you something to talk about and have things shared around that brand story without it feeling so kind of pushy, salesy as well. That's
and it's the truth. We go back to that again, right? So when it's real, when it's genuine and it's the truth, the message lands, I think, so much better too.
Number 12, sorry. Fear may remain long-term. What did you mean by that? No, I'm forgetting this one.
No, this was the whole notion of, we talked about risk credits, right? And people everyone's on a different spectrum of fear around health, safety, economic fear, whatever it might be. But this whole notion that we're potentially creating, this is kind of based on Martin Lindstrom's work, we're potentially creating an entire generation that it will be pre-programmed, kind of reprogrammed, I should say, with an element of fear, which will impact the way that they make consumer decisions going forward and throughout their life. And so, in a recent blog post, I was talking about the whole idea around risk credits, what we're willing to trade in exchange for an experience, and everyone's on a different level. And so again, it kind of comes back to that whole, how do you, is there something you could do to kind of alleviate fear for people, and how do you make yourself relevant? And remember how I said, luggage sales were down 70%, right? Okay, so to be monos luggage in Vancouver is a tough place to be right now, right? They were, a base, basically a luggage company, kind of the whole simplistic design, kind of monos was kind of the whole Japanese, simplistic, beautiful stuff, but at an economical price. But, looks like it should be much more expensive. They're not selling a lot of luggage these days, let's face it. But what they were able to do was I don't like to use the word pivot, but they started to offer additional products. And one thing was this thing called the Clean Pod, which was a UVC sterilizer. It was like a wand that you can put across your keyboard, you can put across anything, and it basically kills, I think it's like 98% of all germs. And so they positioned this as a product offering, be able to have part of the conversation, but be relevant and address fears. Obviously, this thing is small enough you could take it traveling with you, but you can use it right now in your home. Right. And so again, I don't know if it's kind of an interesting, just one little switch that a company made to address a fear.
Well, and the refunds, giving the refunds on travel, that's a big one, right?
Yeah, that's another huge piece of this, right? For the whole travel thing, but just recognizing where people are at. Okay. And
honoring that, people are in fear right now. And how can my business support their position of fear and be able to make their life a little bit easier? What is it that they need again? And how can I shift my business to support that need in whatever form? I mean, that business that you just shared with us completely, that's a different product. So that's very, very innovative.
It became something that, and part of it, they actually did partial proceeds were being donated back to the United Way to help support COVID recovery efforts in I think sort of at-risk communities. I think that was kind of the piece of it. But again, it's just those little things. How can you put your brand into the story that people care about? Right? That's the piece that I think that we're trying to get at here. And obviously, I mean, that's a business that is hurting right now. Right?
And for those of you trying to learn about brand is more than just your logo. As you were seeing about it, your brand is the voice of your company, the story, everything that's around it. Right. And
culture.
It is, yeah.
Part of that conversation. Excuse me.
We could have a whole other call on branding. Okay, we're on to number 13. We've hit it, the end.
We've hit 13.
And we've talked about it. This one threads throughout all of them. Word of mouth is more important than ever.
Yeah. And there's so many great examples of word of mouth stuff. I mean, I'm not even sure where to begin, but one company that sort of came to mind when I was sort of thinking, okay, what examples can I share? Do you know Knix? They've kind of redefined the whole intimates for women, kind of that high-tech leak-proof underwear, for period spills. Basically, that's what they sell.
Right.
But their whole founder was obsessed with this whole focusing on consumer women and conversations online and tapping into big insights of what women were dealing with, and then brought a product to market that was kind of part of that conversation. And now it's sort of very multi-generational brands, moms, daughters, it's the whole piece. And their brand images are unapologetically authentic. It's diversity, it's all shapes, it's all sizes, it's ages, ethnicity, whatever it might be. They initially, this brand, they were going to be retailed, and they had retail locations in like Hudson's Bay, 800 plus. They decided to actually just scale it all back online because the large retailers didn't want to carry like the big size brands. And they said, well, that's not really what we're about. We're about being authentic, all women, we want. So they basically brought it back online. And so really by understanding their community and connecting with their community and being part of that conversation, they've now shifted into almost a role of advocacy, right? The whole age doesn't matter, and some of their Instagram posts, some of their stuff, it's around 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s women's in power poses. And so they've taken on this whole kind of advocacy thing, but basically kind of connecting an online community. It's almost like a movement as much as it is a brand, and they've gone from selling more than just underwear, obviously. They've also benefited by that whole at-home kind of casual wear, right? Their underwire bra sales, or I should say the bras without underwires have gone through the moon, right? So
I think that sounds like a good thing to me.
Comfort at home on Zoom.
Yeah, exactly. And so essentially, you know, they initially their company was launched around kind of a bit of a taboo problem, right? They've tackled conversations that used to happen in the shadows, but now they've taken them online, but they've taken them into communities to become, they've had permission to become part of the island and to join the conversation. And their customers are now doing their marketing for them. Yeah. Right. It's kind of a crazy example, but it's Knix, KNIX.ca is the brand, and extremely tastefully done and a great example of word of mouth. I mean, there's other ones, Vessi shoes. I mean, there's another great example in Vancouver, the whole waterproof shoes, right? And huge hit with the millennial generation. But what they did early on is they donate 1,000 pairs of shoes to frontline workers like nurses. They also recognized that nurses were, 30-year-old nurses, they're perfect demographic. And they've, basically they have been part of the conversation. They don't do a whole lot of paid advertising. They have customer fans, and I use the word not lightly, fans, who post content and tag them, and then they reshare that stuff out on their social channels. And so essentially, it's direct purchase only. They share their customers' photos of their shoes in action, right? Profile that stuff on social media. Their customer generated content, I don't know if you remember the one stat, I said customer generated content was 600% more impactful than what brands said about themselves. Mm-hmm. They get this stuff all the time, being part of the conversation, right? It's such a, kind of a really cool example. I mean, the Mount Buller was another one, right? We talked about what they did with their ski passes, how Mount Buller in state of Victoria in Australia opened for 40 days for the season, then, had to deal with how do we do refunds? What do we do with our pass holders? They decided to let the pass holders decide based on the number of days that they skied. Do I get 100% refund? Do I get 50%? Do I want a credit? You tell us. And just the goodwill created the whole word of mouth, the earned media, the conversations, right? When you err on the side of your customer and you have empathy for where they're at, it goes a long way in that whole word of mouth conversation. And right now, as we know, like much more one-on-one, closed groups, Facebook groups, like even Grand Connection, great example, right? You're a closed group, you have to join, and it's easy enough to do that, but it is a closed group. And then within that group, they're sharing tips. I mean, this is a great example. They're getting access to content like this. And so, understanding the power of those closed groups and those one-on-ones right now is super, super important. Yeah.
Well, and just the empathy piece, I think, is really significant in your presentation. That's what I took from it. A lot of it is really looking at, so how can I be empathetic in this current situation, and how can I shift or alter the way that I serve my customers, really. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's, there's, I'm just trying to think about if there's any other ones that I missed on that one. We talked about Hotel Z, Magic Castle in California. That was the popsicle hotline. Remember the dial-up popsicle hotline? So it was Magic Castle Hotel. It's a hotel in California. And basically they, by the poolside, they've got it's a phone, and you can dial, and it says, order up a popsicle. And so basically a butler or concierge brings down a platter with popsicles, right? And so most people who order, it's kids, sometimes parents, but what are you going to do if your kid gets delivered a popsicle on a silver platter by a concierge? You're going to take a photo. You're going to put a video. You're going to post it, right? And so the Magic Castle Hotel is kind of your standard walk-up motel, 2-story, really nothing particularly special. It's kind of got a bit of a spin like the Z, a little bit kind of retro, but it has to compete with the big names, but it does it by this customer generated content. The review sites, if you go, just Google Magic Castle Hotel, popsicle hotline, it's everywhere. right?
Huh.
And they've got earned media there. It shows up in their TripAdvisor stuff. One thing, they gave away freaking popsicles.
You have a course on your website as well?
I do. I've got something called Marketing with Media, and it's in the top part. It's called courses, and it's essentially, it's taking all parts of media. So I talk about the home being your website, your blog, your e-newsletter, the stuff that you own is your main asset. And then we've got rented, earned, embedded, and paid media. So rented being your social, you build it on the platforms. You don't actually own it, but you're a tenant with the landlord. So you use that to leverage and gain audience, but you don't build only assets exclusively there. Then your rented, your earned is your earned media publicity, whether it be through traditional media or through online podcasts, e-newsletter, guest posting. Embedded, I call that, is kind of your secret weapon. That's when you use somebody else's broadcast channel to reach a larger audience. So whether it be being a regular columnist for, say, something like the Huffington Post or a magazine, an association newsletter, or being a guest interviewed on a podcast. And then there's the paid. And that's not only traditional paid, but it's also digital and social media paid. And so I talk about all of those things feeding ultimately the home, your home, and driving that with objective for your business. So it's called Marketing with Media, and it's accessible in the top part of my website under courses.
Perfect. Awesome. So Mary, gosh, golly, I just thank you so much. I love what you know. I feel so fortunate that Grand Connection has had you as one of our expert speakers, but also that you took this just deeper and clearer and into a deeper level for people to understand. So just thank you, Mary. Awesome. Just respect you so much and appreciate
Thanks again for having me back and being able to share and going a little deeper on some examples. It's always fun.
That's great. That's
Hashtag
great.
we love Mary.
We do.
I know, following your Sunday newsletter, I saw these trends coming up, and we were able to have you come out and share them with our group, and it's a great newsletter. Everybody just follow it. It's one of the best ones I follow. So
Thank
good
you.
value, Mary. Thank you.
Here,
Thank you.
Okay.
So for all you people out there that are seeing us for the first time, go to grandconnection.ca and please attend our next event. We do 2 events every month. One we call The Show with expert speakers like Mary, and the second event 2 weeks later is called the Real Time Connections, and we joint venture with other virtual networking organizations from around the world. So please join us, and we look forward to seeing you at the next event. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.